It is on. I got Dee Dee.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joaquin Esquivel. I'm chair of the State Water Board. I think we can begin to gather here. Mr. Loffer, is there anything further?
No, Chair Esquivel, Member Dodek will be joining us a few moments late, so you have a quorum, and if you'd like to begin, you may.
Great. Well, thank you. Good morning again, everyone. My name is Joaquin Esquivel, chair of the State Water Board. Today is Tuesday, January 19th. It is 9 a.m. and I would like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to begin by introducing my fellow board colleagues here. With me today is Vice Chair Doreen Diadamo, Board Member Laurel Firestone, Board Member Sean McGuire, and Board Member Tam Dodek. I'd also like to introduce our fellow staff colleagues, Executive Director Eileen Sobek, Michael Loffer, our Chief Counsel, our two Chief Deputies, Eric Oppenheimer and Jonathan Bishop, and our Clerk of the Board, Janine Townsend. And assisting to her today is Margie Argel. As you can tell, this meeting is being webcast and recorded and has been for the last year, almost coming on in a couple of months, in order to comply with the governor's stay-at-home orders and also by executive order. We don't have a physical meeting room. Instead, we're here on this virtual platform and you're viewing us one of two ways. You're either on the Cali PA web stream or on the YouTube web stream. But if you intend to comment on any of today's items on the agenda, you should be here on the Zoom platform with us. And so at the top of today's agenda are instructions on how to join us here, or you can send an email to comment letters at waterboards.ca.gov, and the clerk of the board will help you get onto the platform here with us. We'll move on then to, as we customarily do, public forum. Before I go to, I think we have a couple public speaker cards. I do just want to note that actually tomorrow we will not be starting our workshop at 9 a.m. and instead we'll be starting at 11. And that's to accommodate for the inauguration that will be happening tomorrow. And it's been 2 weeks since we last met. We last met on Tuesday, January 5th, and it was Wednesday, January 6th that we all saw some events unfold in Washington, D.C. that I think really warrants us taking the time tomorrow morning to participate in the peaceful transfer of power. And I think remind ourselves that we've created these institutions for ourselves, to govern ourselves, for ourselves and by ourselves, as we might say. And important to remember that this isn't the case. Democracies going back into human history are somewhat fragile, and I think really require our continued attention, commitment, and engagement in peaceful, thoughtful, rational ways. And so gladly take the time tomorrow to ensure that we all, again, participate in what is a pretty incredible thing that we have here amongst us, emanating from the federal government here to us as state agencies and governance, all the way down to the local level. And it's the functioning of that and our commitment to it that is really critical. And so just wanted to take a moment to reflect and give some thought as to, I think, something that many of us witnessed and still processing. And so just want to thank you all for your commitment to these processes, this governance that we have, and the transparency therein. So hopefully we continue to do right and hold the faith of these governing institutions that we have an incredible honor of being part of, and that we welcome you all to continue to engage and keep us transparent and accountable in our decision making as well. And if you see something, engage and participate. So thank you.
Chair Esquivel.
Yes.
Hi.
Vice Chair.
Thank you for your really thoughtful comments. I just thought I'd let you know I'm having some challenges with my video, so
Oh, of course.
I'm gonna restart, but I'll be back shortly and hopefully it'll work.
Okay. Thank you so much, Vice Chair. And okay, I think we have a couple of public forum comments to go to. I think first we have Lori Pesante from the Dolores Huerta Foundation here. And you'll be here invited in a moment to share your camera and unmute. And you don't need to also share your camera if you don't desire to.
Good morning, everybody. Let me see. It did not give me the ability to show my video, so I will just be heard. How about that?
That's fair.
Good morning. My name
Ms.
is
Pesante, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Chief Counsel Michael Loffer. If you try again, see if you can share your video at this point. There we go.
Good morning.
Fantastic. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Lori Pesante. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Director of Civic Engagement and Government Relations for the Dolores Huerta Foundation based in Bakersfield. But of course, we serve the Central Valley and Antelope Valley and High Desert as well. The opportunity to speak today, I became aware of because about 2 months ago, a community member came to us to address and bring to our attention a problem related to community access to water resources in Bakersfield, specifically the segment of the Kern River adjacent to Lake Ming and Lake Ming itself. And of course, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, we're a 501c3. Our mission is to inspire and organize communities to build volunteer organizations empowered to pursue social justice, and water is definitely something that has been on our radar for quite a while. And certainly I myself am an impacted community member. My son's school receives notifications every year related to pollutants in his school's water. And both of my children have chronic medical problems related to pollution that specialists have told us in no uncertain terms we should move. So I certainly uplift today for everyone the voices of community members, and especially our farm worker communities that access that segment of the Kern River. And approximately 75% of the people who use that area are from our Latino communities here in the outskirts, that they just don't have swimming pools. They don't have access to other public water resources for cooling down in what are increasingly hot, protracted summers here in the Central Valley. So just to highlight those community members and their experiences, it is the case that over time it has gotten hotter and hotter. And I myself have lived here for, I went to high school here, moved away, came back, and have spent the last 15 years here. I see less and less fog, less and less opportunity to see the Kern River filled with water in a sustainable way. And so I wanted to also uplift the voices of Bring Back the Kern this morning and other restoration projects for 3 reasons. Number one, the community stakeholders who've already mentioned who are impacted. Number 2, what recent information tells us about the role of industry in preserving natural resources and addressing climate problems. And finally, the accountability piece that I'm so grateful our chair this morning has discussed, because this is very much on our minds as well. It is the case that the Bakersfield Californian reported in August of last year that climate change report forecasts hard times for agriculture. And certainly I have seen other projections that identify up to as much as 70% of agricultural lands being unusable within the next 50 years related to climate change, specifically protracted extreme heat and drought. As well as the fact that in this same article, the study concluded that these hurdles ultimately challenge the ability to maximize production while ensuring profitability. And indeed, a closer look at that profitability doesn't seem to stay within the Central Valley, and yet we have seen for decades within the same communities that I serve, the lowest education rates in the state, the highest pollution rates, chronic medical problems, and some of the highest unemployment rates. So certainly our community members they are seeing neither the access to the public resource nor the benefits of what profits are being made off of them. So I want to also identify this morning the final piece of accountability, and that's that the estimate of US greenhouse gas pollution was just released on the 12th by the Rhodium Group. They have a fantastic piece in The Atlantic about it, where the 2020 year was such a strange year because of the pandemic. We were able to really use it as a way of verifying and dispelling conclusions that are appropriate to draw about climate change and our own contribution to it. And primarily the conclusion I want to highlight for us all today is the fact that while transportation was utterly decimated, it was not the factor. Personal behavior of you and me and all of us was not nearly the factor that was highlighted. The number one factor now, and the problem for us all, that we need to put all of the best brains on is industry. And of course, this brings me right back to why I'm here to speak to the California Water Board. It is the case that Kern County has not been the best rule follower or having an eye on equity. And certainly this board has an extremely important role in providing accountability. And I see my time is up, so I'll finish by saying thank you very, very much for your time today. It is the fact that geography is destiny. And I would like very much for the destiny of all of us here in the Central Valley to be one of prosperity and equity. So with that, I appreciate your time very much and wish you the best of luck with the rest of your meeting.
Thank you so much, Ms. Basanta. Really appreciate you taking the time to give voice to the issues you're seeing in the community. And just on reflection, very much see parallels in the Eastern Coachella Valley often and some of the challenges faced for many a community there. Some different geographies, sometimes similar circumstances. So, but thank you. I appreciate the comments.
I'll just add my thanks. So that's, I lived in the Southern San Joaquin Valley for most of my career, and I resonate with the points you've made and the reality that every community deserves a chance to thrive, and access to water is, basic, and that I absolutely appreciate the participation and continued engagement. Thanks.
Thank you, board member. And thank you again, Ms. Basante. Next up, we have Maureen Daggett. And I believe she's speaking on behalf of the Winemakers Group Stormwater Compliance Program.
And Chair Esquivel, it appears that Ms. Daggett has not yet been able to join us in the Zoom meeting. It could be she just decided to reserve her comments for tomorrow, where she's also slated to speak.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Lawford. Thank you. Okay, well, that concludes public forum. And again, public forum is something that the board conducts here, not by requirement, but by custom, to allow anyone to speak before the board on any matter not pending currently before the board. Thank you again. Next, we will go on to actual board business here, and our first item, which is adoption of the board meeting minutes from the January 5th board meeting. And if there aren't any additions or discussion further on it, we can move to adoption.
I'll move to adopt the January 5th board meeting minutes.
I will
Great.
second.
Thank you. Ms. Townsend, can you please call the roll call vote?
Board Member McGuire,
Aye.
Board Member Dodick,
Aye.
Board Member Firestone,
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo,
Aye.
and Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. And the vote carries and the board meeting minutes are adopted. Thank you, everyone. Next, we'll move on to informational item number 2, which is an update on the board's actions and responses to COVID-19. We've been using this standing item really at this point to inform, not just as we implemented the shutoff moratorium early on in the pandemic, but discussion therefrom. And so those of you that have been following along a bit, we committed to doing a survey ultimately of our systems and households to understand the arrearages or the debt that was accumulating in households, and also then the impacts on systems, knowing that those declines in revenues can have impacts. And so just want to first just start off and give thanks and hand it over to Darren Polhamus and Max Gomberg here to take us through the findings of that data exercise.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair Esquivel and fellow board members. So today I want to start first with some thanks. First, thanks to some of our staff who won't be on the presentation today, but really all these results are from their hard work. Scott Coffin, Mariel Panera, and Bethany Robinson really did the bulk of the very hard work of pulling together this data and crunching the numbers that you're going to see today. It was a lot of work to get there, and I do appreciate their efforts. It was Herculean, but I think gave us great results. Also, Max and Sean for their leadership. They'll be presenting most of this today. It was obviously a scramble that you put us on. It may not seem fast to get here with this amount of work, but there was a lot of work behind the scenes to put this together, and they did a great job of leading the team to pull that together. Certainly, I want to thank all the DDW staff. I think it bears repeating again that we, for the small system survey, did direct outreach to over 400 water systems to try to collect this data and make it high quality. And that was a success, as you'll see when we get into the data part of the presentation. So thanks to DDW staff. That's out of the norm, but not out of the norm in the sense of their ability to stand up for emergencies and proceed forward. So my thanks to our staff that were able to do that. And then finally, a thank you to the water systems. Obviously, we were asking very tough questions of them in a very troubled time when they're very busy, and for them giving us the time to put this together. So from all of that coming together, it's a great success, I believe you'll see today. It does present us with some interesting information to move forward with. And, this was a very big effort. It wasn't without costs. We are delayed on some of our normal activities, but of course, this was a very important topic that we needed to move on now and move forward with. It's pertinent in the moment and the emergency and a critical response effort that we needed to take. So I think those costs are worth it, but people should know that certainly some of our regulations and other things have been put aside a little bit while we were working on these for the last couple months, and we will continue to work hard to fit those in. But we do want to balance that across, and certainly that was part of the decision the board made, and rightly so. And then finally, if I give my quick summary to kind of prep you for the information you're about to see, I think it brings home two big messages here. First, as we were working through the SAFER program, dealing with water systems that are on the human right to water list, and then shortly working to add those that are at risk of being on that list soon here through our needs analysis, this effort you'll see presents only one more worry and stressor associated with that. So we do believe it is a bit additive, and that we were already working in the right space and basically fully committed with the resources we had to that. So this is a bit disconcerting at this time as we go forward, and we'll need to color our thinking as we move forward associated with that. But it is a bit of an additive on top of many of the systems that were already struggling, and does put at risk more water systems potentially. With that said, I guess the way it makes me feel as we go through the data is, and risk possibly being quoted on this, it's don't panic, but be very worried. A lot of our water systems are showing great robustness in their ability to continue to meet their public service and provide healthy water and water service to their customers, which is a testament to the systems, and congratulations to them for their hard work. They're unsung heroes in many ways. They don't get the newspaper headlines that our first responders often do, but they are certainly an underlying component of our society and our ability to weather this as a country and as a society. So thanks to them for that, and a testament to their ability to do that. But that said, they're suffering great pain, and there are things to worry about as we get into the details. You'll see that this isn't without cost, and that there will be ramifications in the future associated with that. So those are my opening remarks. I will turn it over to Max to begin the presentation, and we'll certainly be here for questions as we go through. So thank you.
Thank you, Darren, and good morning, Chair Esquivel and board members. We're going to walk through the results of the survey today. But before we do that, actually, we just for everyone's benefit, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got here and some of the other things we've done since the pandemic began 10 long months ago now, when we went into shutdown. So if I could have the next slide. Here is just sort of a list of some of the actions in the drinking water space the board has been involved with over the past 10 months now, to really help us get through the pandemic as best we can. As you'll all recall, the governor issued an executive order back at the beginning of April, which instituted a moratorium on water shutoffs for non-payment. But it also did a couple of other things. In particular, it asked the board to develop some guidelines and best practices. We did that. Those are available on the board's website. In addition, owing to the fact that we wanted to make sure that people were getting service reconnected if they had been shut off pursuant to the executive order, or had a venue to raise issues or complaints related to what to do about payment or threatened shutoffs, things like that. We stood up a website and created a hotline for people to record issues in Spanish. Those are up. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We also started our survey efforts actually back in June with an initial survey to systems about system financial impacts, but that one didn't have the full force staff effort we put into the one that we're going to be talking about today, and it didn't get a very significant response. But we did do that back in June, and sort of that got us started on sort of the survey mechanics. We have been working with our colleagues at the Public Utilities Commission, which regulates about 15% of the drinking water in the state, along with electric service and other utilities. We held a joint workshop with them back in October to talk about what they were doing, what we were doing, sharing data, and that collaboration continues. And then we began our current survey at the beginning of November, after a series of consultations and discussions with water systems and NGOs to make sure we were asking questions that were going to get us good data, and we did. Next slide. So just briefly before we get to the survey results, I do want to mention, as we've had this website up, we have been getting reports in, and the number of reports, as you can see, really jumped in December. And so between December and January, that's over half the total of hits or formal reports or complaints we've gotten through the website. And We don't know why things jumped in December. It could be that it was holiday time and people were anxious. It could be the fact that people were beginning to hear about potential assistance from the federal government. We don't know why. But what we do know is that we had an increase in the reports, and our staff follows up on each of these to see how we can help, to remind the water system that they should be informing their customers about whatever assistance is available, that even if they get a notice that says shut off on it, that there will be no shut off for non-payment because the moratorium is in place, or if it's a longer standing issue, to see what can be done. So we're diligently working on those, and just wanted to let you know where things stand on the website. Next slide. So turning to the survey itself, what we did was we designed a survey to really help us answer two key questions. What's happening with some of our smaller and medium-sized water systems in terms of their overall finances, their revenue streams compared to what they're spending, their reserve funds, and their overall financial standing. And then also to understand the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on households, and particularly households that are struggling to pay for all expenses, whether it's rent, food, utilities, including water, and understand how the water portion of debt has been accumulating over time. And then, of course, this data will hopefully inform ongoing discussions, both at the state and federal level, about assistance options. So what we did to pull the survey together is we divided our community water systems into the very large systems and then the small and medium-sized systems. Small medium systems are those with fewer than 10,000 service connections. That's the vast majority of community water systems in the state. And the large water systems, a little over 200 of them, serve over 10,000 service connections. A smaller number of systems, but they serve a majority of the state's population. And for the small and medium systems, we engaged in a very proactive, intensive outreach methodology where our drinking water staff actually made phone calls to every single system on our survey list, which was generated randomly to make sure we had a good statistical basis for our results. And so over a 2-week period, there were a lot of phone calls made. And as Darren mentioned, a really heavy lift by staff, and great work by all of our drinking water staff and field office staff in particular. On the large water system side, we worked again carefully with the associations and with advocates to make sure that we were asking good questions. We emailed out the survey. We held a workshop in mid-November to make sure that the systems understood the questions and what data was to be submitted. And the result of all of that was a very, very robust survey response. Next slide. Oh, so, and before I get to that, what did we ask? So again, in a little more detail, you can see generally what we asked on this table. What we were looking for the smaller and medium-sized systems is really to understand, again, their financial standing, and whether they had significant stressors, whether it was drawing down reserve funds, significant drops in revenue, and other issues that could lead to them needing assistance sometime this year, if not in the next 6 months. What we were looking for the household data was really what are the debt levels, how many people have debt, how much debt, and where is that debt located. We asked for a by zip code reporting of the debt, and we'll go through those results in a few minutes. Next slide. So as I said, we had a really robust survey response. What you can see here is that not only did we have a really strong response, but also the response in total, when you look at the percent of the state's population covered, is about 70% of the population, about 28 million people covered just by the survey responses out of California's population of roughly 40 million. And so that means that we had a really strong base for our statistical work to come up with statewide estimates of impacts, both at the system level and at the household level. And again, really want to thank all of the staff and all of the systems that worked on these responses. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sean McCarthy from our drinking water, who led the drinking water staff up to talk about the system level responses.
Okay, thanks, Max. Good morning, Chair Esquivel and board members. If we could have the next slide, please. Wait, Max, I think this might be yours.
Well, I'll talk
I
through
wasn't
this one
prepared to this. Yeah.
just really quickly, and then hand it over to you, Sean. So again, as I mentioned, for the small and medium systems, we surveyed over 400 of them. And the way we did it to develop a really robust estimate is we broke them into bins, and you'll see this in some of the slides going forward. And really the key takeaway from this slide is just as a reminder to everyone that the vast majority of our community water systems in the state are quite small. Almost 2,000 of them have fewer than 1,000 service connections. That's all the green on this chart, and so we drew from those, and then drew from larger system bins of between 1,000 and 10,000 service connections to make sure, again, that we were capturing a sample size that would allow us to have a high confidence in our results statistically, and then when we were extrapolating to statewide figures and estimates. So that's sort of why this is here, and this is a good time to let people know we will be holding a technical workshop tomorrow afternoon to go through the statistical analysis and our methods in much more detail for those who want to get into the data. Next slide. And so again, what you see here are the bins. These were just the breaks from the last slide, how we grouped systems together for our sampling purposes. And again, what you can see is even the smallest systems, that bin A group of few systems with fewer than 1,000 service connections, we had a really high survey response rate. So, all right, now, Sean, I will turn it over to you. You need to unmute.
Knew that would happen. Okay. Good morning again, everybody. For this part of the survey, as Max said, we do want to find the financial impact down at the water system level for these small and medium sized water systems, and determine a statewide projection of how many water systems could be facing a financial crisis and how long they can sustain their operations despite being unable to collect payment from customers, and with the shutoff prohibition and the amount of household debt that is accruing among their customers. So we asked specific questions about their revenue and expenses from April through October for both 2019 and 2020 to get a comparison, the amount of cash reserve funds they currently have available, and then a self-evaluation of how long they can continue operations before financial assistance is needed. And so if you go to the next slide, we asked this question. It's a self-evaluation of their estimate of their financial operations before they may need financial assistance. And as you can see, the majority of the water systems reported no assistance would be needed, about 60%, in fact. But 12 systems did tell us from our sample that they would need financial assistance within 3 months. And considering we collected this data back in November of 2020, 3 months is about up. So we were concerned, are we facing an emergency situation with these specific 12 systems, and how many other systems were out there? So over the holidays and in the beginning of January, our staff again made a second call to these 12 specific systems, and really to understand their situation better, and ultimately determine, for the vast majority, these water systems are resilient. This crisis won't immediately impact their operations in the short term. They do have contingency plans available to consider delaying capital projects that they had planned and budgeted for this year. Some systems also have the opportunity to shift some funds from other municipal fund sources that are available to the water systems. So, in the short term, these systems do not see it impacting their water system operations, but obviously this is not a long-term sustainable option for many water systems. And considering we collected data on revenue and expenses and reserves, we created a vulnerability score of the water system's overall financial vulnerability during this pandemic, and using this self-reported estimate as one of the 3 criteria in our vulnerability ranking. And what you see in red under the sample and the statewide projections, is what we would consider high risk for this, when they may need financial assistance within 6 months. And if you go to the next slide, when we looked at the amount of unrestricted cash on hand from our sample, what we did find that a number of water systems, up to about 20%, had less than 60 days of cash reserve on hand, unrestricted funds, which they could be used to cover water system operations. And we consider that a second high risk indicator. And again, you can see a statewide projection of about 18%, potentially 400 plus water systems statewide would have less than 60 days of cash reserve on hand. Going to the next slide. The third criteria we considered would be their operating ratio, basically their revenue to expense. If we found a water system that is not meeting their expenses, their revenue is dropping, or their expenses are increasing, they would have an operating ratio of less than 1 or 0.95. In this case, we consider that a high risk indicator for these water systems. And again, about another 20% to 25% of water systems would fall into this high risk score for our vulnerability. And next slide. And so putting these 3 criteria together, we ranked them, we collected the data on the water systems, and for systems with 0 out of 3 risk indicators, we'd obviously consider low financial vulnerability. 1 out of the 3 would be medium, but then 2 out of the 3 and 3 out of the 3, this is where we get into sort of the high and extreme financial vulnerability. And as you can see, there's about 10% of those systems would fall into that category from our sample and also our statewide projections. The extreme category would be 25 systems statewide, which does not seem to be an unreasonable situation, given how we know many other small and medium-sized systems currently operate. They currently struggle to maintain compliance. They currently struggle to recover from disasters. This would be expected. But when you look at add in a second criteria, or meeting 2 of the 3 high risk indicators, it expands to about 270 water systems, which is a significant number. It's definitely a number of water systems. We are going to have to be vigilant to see if their financial crisis begins to develop over the coming months. As the amount of household debt accrues, they aren't able to pay expenses from their revenues dropping. And as I said, they are resilient in the short term, but in the long term, they have many needs that will have to be met. And go on to the next slide, please. And so just some overall general comments we received from the small systems on their surveys, either in the survey when we did in November or from some of the follow-ups we did earlier this month. Again, they would be delaying capital improvement projects, and these would be things like mainline replacements they had planned for this year, well rehabilitations, maybe some tank rehabilitations. In the short term, they can put it off, but in the long term, you know, water infrastructure exceeds its useful service life, and it will have to be replaced at some point in the future. Some water systems are planning to either delay rate increases or plan for new rate increases to recuperate this lost revenue. One of the findings we did get from a few of the systems in our follow-up was it made them reevaluate how they do their financial management, maybe better accounting of their revenues, better accounting of their expenses. And that provides an opportunity where we can step in with some technical assistance, either through SAFER or through our other technical assistance providers to help train and build that financial capacity during the situation. Some water systems also reported they have increased costs specifically due to the COVID-19. This would be either purchasing PPE equipment for their workers, increased disinfection, sanitation of their facilities. Absences always is going to be an issue. Social distancing, quarantine makes it difficult to do their job. Equipment for staff to work remotely. And I think one of the systems we surveyed, about the 400 systems we surveyed, only one of them reported that they had an outbreak of COVID. This was at least back in November while we were doing the data collection. But, you know, from a high level view, I think overall the water systems are very resilient and robust, but it's a short-term issue. It's a short-term resiliency. Long-term, the loss in revenue and the increase in household debt, as Max will go into in a second, you know, is just going to delay capital improvement projects, and the water systems will have many needs that they will need to address. And this is the opportunity where we may have, we've learned from SAFER, the needs assessment survey, the determinant of at-risk water systems. This would just be one additional category that would fall into something that we would have to look at and plan for down the future. I think next slide, I think we handed it back to you, Max, for the household debt.
Thanks, Sean. So I'm going to walk us through the household debt results. Again, we asked all of the systems, small and large, to tell us about the debt held by residential accounts, and how that debt is distributed both by amount of debt and then by zip code. Next slide. So what you see on this chart is two things. First is our estimate of total debt, and then at the bottom, an estimate of households with more than $1,000 of debt, so a very high amount of debt. So looking at the top half of the table first, actually looking at the title of the slide first, this is an important point. We collected data through October. We administered this survey in November. It's now January, and so you know, the total debt estimate you can see in the middle on the right there, $789.3 million. Was the total debt estimate through the end of October, and hence when we think about what is the current total debt, we have a high confidence that current total debt is at least $1 billion, because again, another couple of months have gone by, November, December, we're through the middle of January, and one way you can think about this is that household debt has been accumulating on average statewide at about $100 million per month over the course of the pandemic. And the other thing to note here is that we did do a lot of work on understanding the data and looking at the estimate in terms of the statistical robustness. And what you see there is that we have really high confidence in this estimate based on the analysis that our staff did, and we'll go through that again on the workshop tomorrow in more detail. In terms of the accounts with over $1,000 of debt, we have a pretty high degree of confidence of how that looks like for customers of large water systems, which serve the vast majority of the state's population, less so for customers of small and medium systems. But what you see down there in the total at the bottom is our estimate that at least 155,000 households statewide, so that's nearly 500,000 people, are facing debt amounts of over $1,000. And that was, again, through the end of October. So that's a particularly concerning finding for households that hold really high amounts of water debt. And of course, it's important to note that the debt may be for services beyond water. If there are services such as wastewater or electricity, stormwater on the water bill. And I'll go into more detail on that in a minute, as well as the fact that we covered 70% of the state by zip code, so we know where the highest debt zip codes are based on the survey responses, but there may be others within the 30% of the state we didn't cover. Next slide. So this slide is again just to show that when we looked at the amounts and we used our statistical analysis methods to calibrate the debt by service connections, by income, we came up with estimates that are really significantly robust in terms of the confidence level. Those are those bars over there on the right-hand side of this slide. Next slide. So here are some of the high-level findings on the household debt. As I mentioned, our current estimate for household debt is $1 billion or more. And in terms of whether that debt is water versus other services, our best estimate there is that it's at least 60% water specific, drinking water specific debt. In terms of how many households hold debt at whatever level, so that could be as little as $100 or as much as over $1,000, our estimate is there are at least 1.6 million households in the state that have some amount of water debt. That's 12% of the households in the state having some amount of water debt. And again, average debt is about $500 per household, but the distribution is very skewed in terms of that debt. There are a lot of households that have relatively low amounts of debt below $200, and then there's a significant number of households that have over $1,000 worth of debt. Next slide. So here is the debt distribution by increments of $100. So what you see over there on the y-axis is just number of delinquent accounts, and then the x-axis has the debt increments. And what you can see again is that a significant portion of households have debt below $200, but concerning is that large bar over there on the right with over 150,000 households with over $1,000 of debt. Next slide. And this is another way of sort of understanding the debt per delinquent account data. Again, on the y-axis is the number of service connections. So the dots towards the top are those systems that are the largest systems in the state. that have a lot of connections. And then the x-axis is debt per delinquent account. And what's notable on this slide is sort of as you go from the bottom left towards the top right, there are a number of systems where they have a significant number of service connections, over 50,000 service connections, where the average debt per account is over $400. And in one case, a system with over 60,000 service connections has an average per delinquent account debt level of over $600. That is highly concerning. Next slide. So we asked for systems to tell us not only how many accounts had debt, but also where those accounts, those residential accounts, were located in the zip codes that they serve. Next slide. And this is a really useful data set to understand where debt is held in the state and where it is most highly concentrated. And what this slide shows is that there are a number of places, regions of the state where there are high numbers of residential accounts with significant debt, mostly in LA County, but also in the Santa Maria area of Santa Barbara County and in the Rancho Cordova area of Sacramento County. These are areas with high numbers of accounts with some level of household debt. Next slide. When it comes to the households with over $1,000 worth of debt, those are all in LA County. And again, that's LA County is a quarter of the state by population. There is a strong correlation between having debt and median household income of an area. LA County has a number of zip codes with low median household incomes, but it really just goes to show that there is a significant concern here with LA in particular, with high levels of debt. Although I will note that part of what's going on here likely is the fact that the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, which serves the city of LA, is one of those water systems that charges for multiple utility services on one bill. So it's not just a drinking water bill, it has electric service, also stormwater on one bill. And those bills only go out once every other month. So it's not a monthly bill, it's a every 2-month bill. And so you can imagine with multiple services on one bill, if you miss a couple of bills, the amount of debt goes up quite quickly. Next slide. So this slide, what you see is zip codes where with the highest number of accounts on the left that are delinquent, and then the table on the right is the highest number of accounts with over $1,000 of debt. The highlighted zip codes are the three which have not only high numbers of residential accounts, households with debt, but also the highest numbers of accounts with very high levels of debt. All three of those zip codes are in South and South Central LA. Next slide. Another way to look at this data is to look per capita in terms of the delinquent accounts. So again, we're looking at zip code level data. Zip codes have different total populations, but when you look again sort of as a per capita basis, the picture is somewhat different. Includes a couple of Northern California communities, Port Costa, which is on the Carquinez Strait in Contra Costa County, and then Clear Lake up in Lake County, as well as a few other areas of Southern California outside of LA, including in San Bernardino County. Next slide. And again, when you look at sort of a per capita basis of debt, it's still highly concentrated in LA, but there are a couple of other areas of concern as well, including the Bakersfield area up there in Kern County, and part of the part of the high desert out in San Bernardino County. Next slide. And this is just one more way to look at this data, which is the per capita numbers, and then understanding the total population. So as I mentioned, right, the zip codes are not evenly distributed in terms of population. So if you look at the top left there, 94569, that's the Port Costa area, again up in Contra Costa County in the Outer Bay Area. It's a very small community. The total population is only 205 people, but there are 81 delinquent accounts there. So it's a very high per capita number, but small numbers relative to the Southern California zip codes, such as 90001, with almost 15,000 delinquent accounts and nearly 60,000 people in that one zip code. Next slide. So one of the other analyses we did is we took this zip code level data, and then we looked at census data, demographic data on race, income, to understand the correlations, the relationships between the zip code level debt and then the demographic characteristics of the populations in those zip codes. And I think that the key finding to mention here is that people who were already hurting pre-COVID, communities that were lower income, Black and brown communities, are those that have been most heavily impacted overall and by the water debt. And so what we see is that the zip codes that are more disproportionately Black and Latinx by population have more households with debt, higher levels of debt, and just overall the strongest correlation between level of debt and any other factor is median household income. So places where people were already struggling economically, those are the areas in the state with the highest amount of debt. Next slide. And again, here's a table to just really show those demographic disparities with respect to household debt. And you can see the bottom row is in communities that we categorize as disadvantaged, and the debt levels are even higher and particularly high for Black households. Next slide. Overall, this was a very successful survey in terms of just the response rate and also the quality of the data we received, which allows us to make all of these statewide extrapolations and do this detailed level zip code analysis. There were some limitations, as there always are, with big data sets. In particular, some of our drinking water systems have billing software that didn't allow them to go back all the way to March, for example, and look at number of billing cycles that where missed payments had accumulated over time. You know, separating out residential single family versus multifamily. You know, a few of them had zip code extraction issues. Overall, we have a really robust data set, however. And then the bottom bullet, again, I would say the one number where we don't have quite as high a degree of confidence in our estimate is that drinking water portion of the total debt. We think it's about 60%, but not every system was able to say, well, based on the total amount of delinquency, we think this much is related to drinking water versus other services. It's difficult to do that with combined bills. Next slide. So as I've mentioned, we will be holding a technical call tomorrow in the afternoon to really dive deep into the results, talk about our methods for people who really want to understand the data set and work with it. And then beyond that, certainly this data is useful for people thinking about assistance at both the state and federal level. And so we'll work with our policymakers and the administration to help them develop options. And of course, we're going to really focus on our vulnerable systems and make sure that we are on top of systems that may be requiring assistance or facing financial emergency. And again, encourage any system that really is getting worried to get in touch with their district engineer and have a conversation. And we will be continuing to collaborate with the Public Utilities Commission on sharing data and information about what each of our agencies is doing going forward. So with that, that concludes the staff presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Max and Sean, for, as Darren said, just really the incredible work, and of many others that I know aren't here part of the presentation, but just really contributed to an incredible response and data points now that, you look at the impacts of COVID-19, the pandemic, the economic downturn, even the tensions around racial equity. And I think this continues to just point to how this time is really just further unearthed, if you will, the stress cracks here amongst our water systems that we were already very concerned about prior to the pandemic. Their health and is why we had the passage of the Safe and Affordable Fund, knowing that there was already 300 systems on our list that weren't meeting maximum contaminant limits. And the concern here is that, although glad that it's not a moment of panic that the data is showing us, it's of grave concern for the long-term health of our state systems, particularly those smallest, that this stress test, if you will, this economic downturn and the circumstances we find here are just really further unearthing for us. So just again, really appreciate the incredible work that's gone on to be able to inform what's going to be further policy discussion, certainly in the context of our Safe and Affordable Fund, the needs analysis that we were already conducting there. What does it mean as we characterize at-risk systems and better understand their needs? There even knowing that there were some 80 odd systems that weren't really even able to keep track of their financials in a way to respond to what are some somewhat basic questions here on their financial health and viability. Again, I think pointing to just the real incredible need that a number of our systems have, and that we're going to continue to need to think through as we implement the Safe and Affordable Fund and think through these tools that we have, including consolidation and administrators, to figure out how we protect the long-term health and viability of the state's water systems. Darren, was there anything else you wanted to perhaps add, and would just entertain comment? I don't have any further question here. I know we have a number of commenters would like to hear feedback from so many of the incredible participants that we had as stakeholders in this process. This has been an incredibly collaborative opportunity, and ultimately, I think as well, has strengthened, hopefully, the faith of some of these systems in their district engineers, kind of created a touch point, if you will, and a conversation that I think we sometimes all, it's helpful to be reminded are there, that we're here to try to help systems navigate, and even around sensitive things like their finances, which again, I can feel incredibly sensitive toward. But again, just thank you everyone for the incredible effort. But Darren, anything you'd like to add?
I'll just add one more time that we do want to reach out to those water systems that need help. We know the survey data we presented doesn't represent everybody. You know, it's projections, it's a sample survey. So we will continue those efforts to make sure we're on top of that. And we're happy to answer any questions the board members or that come along. So please proceed.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And I just, one other note that I would want to acknowledge and thank is the demographic analysis that accompanied this as well. It's important to understand a little more granularly instead of, you know, kind of broad brush statewide numbers to figure out what is happening in our communities, where are communities of particular stress, and how might we target our programs to better understand how we actually see the problem and then actually develop solutions therefrom. So just thank you for that work and that analysis as part of that. And for those of you that want to know a lot more insofar as the statistical wizardry that went on in the background here to get us to the confidence in these numbers, again, would point to the webinar tomorrow to please do participate in. Fellow board members, thoughts, questions for folks?
Yeah, I will add a few things, although I think I'll have more to add after public comment, but I did want to just, you know, note that a lot of what we're talking here today is, you know, well, it's overall statewide statistics. And I just want to make sure our message here is not minimizing the panic and crisis that is really real for those systems and individuals that are facing these. So I think even though, you know, there's certainly an acknowledgement of this as a crisis and not wanting to create a state of panic. I also think the, you know, the systems that are both at extreme and high risk are really facing those tensions between ensuring quality of service in addition to the you know, the ability to continue to provide service and have financial viability and sort of ongoing affordability of service and access to service for customers. And there, you know, as systems are feeling that panic in very real ways, you know, I think we need to think about the impacts that we've seen have happen as a result of that. And that includes Flint, where they had to compromise, or they did compromise water quality to try to save money and reduce money. You know, Detroit, when they went into bankruptcy, and you know, I think a lot of systems, including in Pennsylvania, where they their credit ratings meant that they couldn't you know, afford or qualify for the kind of financing they need just to maintain system infrastructure. And so I think that is something that those systems feel really very real panic about. I also, on the individual household data, you know, echo the chair's just real thanks for the racial equity analysis, and hope that we can continue to do that in all of our programs to help inform decision-making and effective responses. There's a really informative, I thought, NAACP Legal Defense Fund and Education Fund analysis around racial justice with household debt. And, you know, we're fortunate right now that the moratorium is in place until we, you know, get through this, at least until we get through this, the declared emergency. But you know, the inability to pay for water bills, the kind of debt that we're seeing for households, even if it's not a huge number for some households, has really real impacts on losing your home, to the extent that there's liens. That could mean that if you are own your own home, you could lose your home in sales tax and ultimately foreclosure. You risk, certainly a threat to your health and human dignity without access to running water should that water get shut off after this emergency because of the kind of debt that we're seeing, and also to the extent that systems are, or that households are trying to figure out how to pay that debt, foregoing medical expenses or food or other basic needs to pay their water bills. There are ways that, should households get really desperate and attempt to do illegal reconnections, that could result in criminal charges, that could, ultimately address people's freedom. And also just and I've seen this firsthand, the reality of the fact that loss of water service can result in parents being at risk of losing custody of their children, as it's a significant factor in determining whether parents are able to provide a suitable home for their children. So I just think it's important for us to, as we recognize and think about the impacts of these numbers that we're seeing, that we recognize the very personal and real and concrete number or experiences behind some of these numbers. And, I think we'll hear from folks and the partners that we have, now in public comment and as we try to craft a response collectively. I think I'll add a few things afterwards, but I really look forward to hearing more of the comments, public comments around this. So thanks.
Thank you, board member. Others? And if not, we can move to public comment and certainly have, I think, discussion thereafter. And to board member Firestone's point, it is about setting the policy table here to have a cogent discussion based off of these data points to understand how we best address these two components here, the impacts to systems, and then also this debt carried by household and the continuum we know therein. So I think we'll transition to public comment then and have further discussion after. And so first, I'd like to call up Andrea Abergel from the California Municipal Utilities Association. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Chair Esquivel, Vice Chair Diadamo, board members Firestone, McGuire, and Dodek. My name is Andrea Abergel, and I am the Senior Regulatory Advocate at the California Municipal Utilities Association, or CMUA. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide public comment on the State Water Board's COVID-19 Financial Impacts Survey collection efforts. CMUA represents over 50 water agencies that cover over 75% of the state's drinking water supply. We appreciate the board's work distilling the data collected by large and small water systems this last November. While we understand that the report presented by staff this morning shows that there is a significant amount of household debt, our water agencies want to work with customers now on payment assistance, payment plans, or other options to tackle their debt. And customers should know that even after the moratorium ends, water agencies want to work together to prevent disconnections or disruptions in service by getting customers on payment plans or alternate options to manage the arrearages. We would also like to note that we appreciate the federal government providing funds for arrearages and hope that the state works on getting the money allocated expeditiously. We are additionally working with the coalition of environmental justice organizations and water agencies to request additional federal funds for utility bills. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you as well, and really appreciate that CMUA has been a collaborator in this space, and I know your membership, a number of leaders, and I believe we'll actually be hearing here later from the general manager of the East Bay Municipal Utilities Utility District. So thank you.
Thank you.
And next we have Jennifer Clary from Clean Water Action. Good morning, Ms. Clary.
Good morning, Jennifer Clary, California Director, Clean Water Action. I just want to thank the State Board for committing to do this survey and for staff for doing such an excellent job. This is really useful information. Speaking on behalf of NRDC as well, who can't be here today, I just want to say that this illustrates the point we've been trying to make for months, which is the COVID pandemic isn't a new crisis. It's just bringing to light the crisis that we've had already. And I want to just thank Board Member Firestone for her comments. And I really want to point out what many of us have understood for a long time, which is when we look at the human right to water map, it really doesn't adequately represent the challenges of access to safe and affordable drinking water in LA. And I think that we should really think about how we're looking at the human right to water and why we're not recognizing that challenge or doing more about that challenge. And I also am interested in understanding how the Water Board plans to triage these water systems that have problems, because I know we have this number of 25 vulnerable water systems, but when I looked at the survey, you had an estimated 134 water systems that said they had less than 6 months of operating revenue, and that 6 months will end at the end of April. So we have time, but we don't have a lot of time to understand what services we're going to offer, when we're going to offer them, and how we're going to offer them for those systems that are going to run out of money, and if either at the end of this month or somewhere through the end of April, and then how we continue that assistance, because unless we continue that assistance past the end of the emergency declaration, those water systems will feel like they need to act to recoup that water debt as soon as possible. And we none of us want that to happen. Anyway, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you as well, Ms. Clary, for the good comments, and look forward to, yes, the further discussion just around what are those tools. And I will say, in chatting with Darren Palamas a bit, we are fortunate to have administrators now tools when it comes to the Safe and Affordable Fund and the SAFER program that didn't exist prior to this moment. Usually it was if a water system was careening toward bankruptcy, they'd land in the courts first. And so this really is our opportunity to have intervention prior. And to your point, the human right to water list now is characterized by those systems that aren't currently meeting maximum contaminant limits. And that's why, to your point, the needs analysis and better unearthing what are the at-risk systems that we know are below that surface that are currently meeting maximum contaminant limits, but maybe won't be in a few months or may be challenged to do so. Those are the ones that we're most concerned about as well here, and that we need to get to before they stop serving safe and affordable clean water, as to get ahead of what is a real challenge here. And I think this data is really, again, unearthing the serious, grave concern that we have as to the challenge before us here. So just thank you for those comments. Next, we have Jonathan Nelson from the Community Water Center. Good morning.
Okay, looks like I'm unmuted now. Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Nelson with the Community Water Center. I also want to start just by thanking the State Water Board staff for all the work that it took to make this happen. Thank you. A lot of work went into this. We've had a lot of difficult discussions over the years that we participated in, but this is certainly one of, I think, the most shocking conversations we've ever had to have, that at least I participated in. I mean, these sobering statistics contain a simple message, at least for us, that if we do not act soon, 1.6 million households, or up to 5 million Californians, may soon experience a drinking water crisis in their homes. And it appears that this is a conservative estimate, given that some systems were unable to effectively track water shutoffs and arrearages, and given that the situation has only grown worse since the survey was conducted this fall. Without action, we are concerned that Californians across the state, both urban and rural areas, particularly living in communities of color, as the data shows, will soon receive a water shutoff notice as a result of a pandemic that they did not cause, and then their water will be shut off. And the painful truth, as has already been discussed, is the very same communities that have borne the brunt, not only of our drinking water crisis before the pandemic, but of the pandemic itself, are now likely to face the worst of the shutoff crisis. So this is unequivocally a matter of environmental justice and racial justice. For us in a pandemic, not having access to safe water is the equivalent to not having access to the most basic form of PPE. Losing access to safe and affordable water after the pandemic means closing the door to an equitable economic recovery for those households. And losing your water, period, anytime due to inability to pay is a violation of the human right to water. As we also know, this is more than just a California crisis. This is a national crisis. The entire country faces this tidal wave of water debt, and it will only further deepen our economic divide. And we cannot have an equitable recovery in this country if we allow for mass water shutoffs. The good news, to the extent that there is any, is that we have this data now. We now better understand, and there's still time, and it's still within our power to act, but we are running out of time. So for Community Water Center, there's a couple of things we want to offer as we now move into the next phase of this discussion, which is how do we move forward from here? First, we do need urgent action at the state level. The legislature and the governor must move swiftly, and they must move urgently to adopt the State Water Board's 2020 plan to create a statewide low-income rate assistance program. A majority of Californians, as identified by that report, lack access to any local water affordability program. Many other local programs are inadequate, and most suffer from weak enrollment. We have a state affordability program for literally almost every other basic utility, but not for water. Other actions that we need to take at the state level include providing relief for families around, such as, for example, eliminating water bill late fees for low-income households who already can't pay their water bill, providing universal access to long-term repayment plans of at least a year in length, and providing relief to small water systems in the form of a bridge, grant, or loan program. And Senator Dodd has long been a champion on these issues. As we know, he introduced the AB 401 legislation that led to these recommendations that have been put forward by the board last year. Senator Dodd has introduced legislation, SB 222 and SB 223, to accomplish just these kinds of actions. So we hope that the legislature can take urgent action on them. We also need the State Water Board to continue to regularly survey systems so that we can stay on top of this, because we know that this is not the end and the situation will continue to unfold. At the federal level, which has already been mentioned, we need President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris to build on the modest one-time emergency water affordability assistance funding passed in December. That was $638 million nationally. California will get about 60 to 70 million of that. We're looking at up to $1 billion here, $1 billion. So we need to take more action. And what we really need is a permanent national water affordability program. So we really hope for leadership from California to accomplish that. And then just finally, just to close, I mean, we've known that even before the pandemic, we lived in a reality divided between those that had safe water and those that didn't. We've known that access to safe and affordable water is more than just a public health threat. It's a matter of basic racial justice, but this really drives it home. The pandemic has really shown a spotlight. And now the 5 million Californians that are facing a potential water shutoff are really counting on us to act. So we look forward to further leadership from all of you. And we will commit to working collaboratively with anyone and everyone to do what we need to do. And we certainly hope that the board will continue to convene key stakeholders for regular discussions about how we effectively move forward from here. So again, thank you to the Water Board staff for now helping us truly understand the scope of the crisis we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nelson, for your good comments and continued collaboration. I think very much this effort demonstrates the collective leadership in this state that we have, and very fortunate to have it both in the policy and thought space and in the managerial space here. So just really appreciate that, and thank you. And on that theme, I actually have Cindy Tuck as well here then from the California Association of Water Agencies. Association of California Water Agencies, rather.
Thank you, Chair Esquivel and board members. I'm going to start the video. There we go.
Good morning.
Good morning. Cindy Tuck with Aqua. Good morning to you, Chair Esquivel, board members, and everybody who's listening to the meeting. We also want to thank staff for all the hard work on the surveys and the analysis. And we appreciate that a workshop is being held tomorrow. I don't know if there'll be a lot of reactions at that meeting. I think everybody will want to, stakeholders of all types, but definitely the water community will want to, hear more about the data and the analysis and the results. And we appreciate the ability to be able to ask questions at that workshop tomorrow. One comment from the information we've seen today is, obviously there was a lot of information about household debt, and that's very important information. And households are experiencing more debt than, just the water part of bills. But I would suggest that when there are slides or communications and it's talking about household debt, that those be very clear about what that covers. So for example, the greater than $1,000 number, if that's including electric bill and other types of services in those amounts, it's important that the communications or slides on that just say that, just be very clear on what it is or what it isn't. I think that would be good for communications.
Sorry, Cindy. So I think it was clear that those were all on water bills, but I think you're saying that within the charges on water bills, some of those charges include non-drinking water charges, and breaking that up would be helpful. Is that, just to clarify, was that your comment?
So for example, I think there was a reference to a lot of the numbers are in Los Angeles, and in Los Angeles, the bill covers more than the water bill. And so just being clear on when are the facts about water debt and when are the facts about broader cumulative debt that shows up on a cumulative bill.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk more with staff about that tomorrow as we come to understand, what the numbers are and what they, what they represent. We're not surprised that the numbers are significant. The executive order has been in place since April. We appreciate the comment about resilience. I think water systems are, trying to manage through this. And I do want to note that our members have I've said this to the board before, but our members do have a good record of working with their customers on repayment plans, and that will be a critical part of solution on this. Finally, and one other note is just that SB 998, the shutoffs law that's in place, that was just starting to be implemented when, at the beginning of April for our members of 2020, and then the executive order went into place suspending that authority for shutoffs. So we have a brand new law that really hasn't been implemented yet, and there's important protections in there that everyone should, if you're interested in that aspect of this, should take a look at that law. And then finally, I just want to really urge the governor and the Newsom administration to join the advocacy in Washington, D.C. The coalition that's led by Community Water Center with Jonathan Nelson and Aqua's been very active in that. We have success in some amount being reached at December 27th. We need more funding for the short term for the COVID financial relief. for water. But as Jonathan said, we also need long-term funding for low-income water rate assistance at the federal level. So if the governor and the Newsom administration would join with us, I think that would be very powerful. There's a real opportunity now to do that. So thank you, and we appreciate the collaboration with the board and the staff, and look forward to that continued collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Cindy, just for the great work and leadership in your space. And I know that, the challenge certainly for us at the water boards is that there's over 3,000 community water systems that we oversee. And it runs the full range, as we saw in the data here, of operations and sophistication and then varying degrees of leadership. But what I do want to acknowledge is that there is a tremendous amount of leadership within the California water agencies. And that's demonstrated in the moratoriums that we saw implemented by a number of water agencies before the governor's executive order even went out. And so it's, our balancing, our discussion is always in mind that it's a full scale and scope of quality and challenges that we see for the various water agencies out there, and want to make sure and acknowledge the good leadership that we continue to see out there as well as part of this discussion and this challenge that we have in front of us. So thank you for being that voice both here in the state and in DC. And it is, I think, definitely that continuum of effort from the federal, state, and local level that needs to be better discussed and coordinated, and look forward to that opportunity. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. And speaking of that disparate leadership throughout the state and individuals, I now want to and glad to call up Clifford Chan, the General Manager of the East Bay Municipal Utility District.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Escobar and board members. My name is Clifford Chan, and I'm the General Manager for the East Bay Municipal Utility District, or East Bay MUD. East Bay MUD provides water service to 1.4 million customers in the East Bay. The pandemic has highlighted the importance of water, but as we all have been experiencing the past year, and what you've seen in the data that Max and Sean presented, it's also created many challenges, including economic challenges that have created problems for customers who are struggling to pay their water bills. And as Chair Escobar noted, last March, before the governor's water shutoff moratorium, we suspended all shutoffs and restored service to customers that were previously shut off because of non-payment. Similar to other utilities, we have not seen the total number of delinquencies increase, but we have seen an increase in the customers with bills over 90 days overdue. And we've also seen the dollar amount of the delinquencies increase. What we're also seeing with our data and the data that was shared with you today is that returning to our pre-pandemic practice of shutting off water service due to non-payment would disproportionately affect disadvantaged communities. East Bay MUD has always had numerous programs to help customers. We have one of the most generous customer assistance programs in the state that can reduce qualified customers' water bills by 50%. We offer customer payment plans and payment extensions. We also help our customers reduce their water use through customer water audits and providing free water-saving devices, which in turn reduces their water bill. And we already do not shut off water service to multifamily residences. Because of the pandemic, we want to build on our existing programs. In December, our board adopted a more progressive policy, directing us to develop a plan to no longer shut off water service to single-family customers. Our plan starts with additional notifications and targeted outreach to customers who are falling behind on their bills. We want to ensure our customer support programs are reaching customers most in need of assistance. Single-family customers who work with us, sign up for a payment plan or a payment extension, who participate in our customer assistance program, or who have documented medical needs will not have their water service shut off or restricted. However, even customers who do not work with or communicate with us will not have their water service shut off. In this instance, a flow restrictor will be installed to provide access to enough water to meet basic needs. But we will only do this after additional efforts to contact and work with those customers. To be clear, flow restrictors will not be used during the pandemic, and flow restrictors will not be implemented after the pandemic until after extensive customer outreach. Our goal is to develop a program that is thoughtful, can be sustainably funded, and adhere to statutory and constitutional requirements. But there is more to do, and we're working with others as we develop our plan to make it even better. I want to close by saying that our plan is based on the data we collected for East Bay Mud. And while the amount of arrears is larger than we've seen in the past, we will be able to manage through this crisis. And we hope that the state and federal programs to help customers with their utility bills is distributed in a way that benefits all regions. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Mr. Chan. Again, the leadership that East Bay Mud is demonstrating is really appreciated and is part of this policy discussion that and to your point, each agency is operated and has different considerations for themselves. But your leadership and contributing to and moving forward with these policies, I think really does help us enrich, if you will, the discussion, the policy discussions we're going to be having in the weeks and months ahead. So just thank you, knowing that we here at the State Board don't run day to day a water system. And to Board Member Firestone's points, there are incredible challenges and stresses out there. And when you're in financial straits, and glad to hear that East Bay Mud is able to continue to manage, is of size to manage and make its way through these tough economic times. But if not, those concerns are certainly very grave and front of mind for a system. And so just thank you for your incredible work day in, day out, and the many I know dedicated to the service at East Bay Mud. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call up Caitlin Kalua with the California Coastkeeper Alliance.
All right, good morning, Chair Escobar, members of the board. My name is Caitlin Kalua. I'm the policy manager for the California Coastkeeper Alliance, which represents local waterkeeper organizations throughout the state who remain committed to swimmable, drinkable, fishable water, which of course includes access to clean, affordable water for every California household. First, we appreciate the fast-acting work done by your staff to collect information regarding water affordability, the impacts of household water debt on water access, and the overall needs of small water systems that are financially vulnerable and vulnerable to environmental stressors, including wildfire and drought. As was emphasized in today's presentation and in public comment, ensuring water access is an issue of racial and environmental justice. The results of today's survey underscore the need for the board to use its authority to address water access and affordability, and the urgent need to develop both short and long-term solutions that help the solvency of both individual households and water systems to serve their communities and to pursue capital improvements that are needed to improve efficiency, water quality, and increase climate resilience through projects such as water recycling and stormwater capture. We also support Senator Dodd's newly introduced legislation that builds from Senate Bill 998 to increase protections against water shutoffs and to authorize the board to take immediate action on the Assembly Bill 401 report that was released February of last year, that is 2020, so we're almost getting to the year mark, and to allow systems to offer a range of payment plans and areage plans, including forgiveness of outstanding water debt in a comprehensive statewide approach to water access and low-income rate assistance. Again, thank you for taking action to collect this data and to understand exactly the extent and gravity of this issue. And I appreciate the opportunity to comment today and look forward to the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kalua. Next, we have Nicole Heel from the LA Alliance for a New Economy.
Hi, good morning, Chair and board members. My name is Nicole Heil, and I'm a research and policy analyst at the LA Alliance for a New Economy. LANE is a local advocacy organization with a vision to help build a new economy rooted in good jobs, thriving communities, and a healthy environment. I want to echo speakers before me in thanking the board and your staff for such a thorough analysis. This data is really extremely important and useful, and it's encouraging to see a public agency that's committed to this type of transparency. With that being said, I'm here to urge you to take action in response to this survey and the growing problem of water debt, both here in LA and throughout the state. So in Los Angeles, we have been seeing living situations of forced overcrowding that have been exacerbated by high unemployment rates during the pandemic. This is causing people to have extremely high utility bills with little or no means to pay, accumulating upwards of thousands of dollars in utility payments, which we've seen your staff has really clearly explained to us earlier. And this thousands of dollars is a lot to ask of low-income Angelenos who are struggling to meet not only this debt, but extremely high rents and other burdens incurred over the last year. And LADWP has their utility grant program, which has provided some relief to customers, but it's obvious that there's still a very large need, both for ratepayers within the city of Los Angeles, as your study has showed, but also, the 6 million people in greater LA County whose utilities might not have the resources that LADWP has. We have these large urban water systems with low tax bases. So now that we know for certain that water debt disproportionately affects communities of color, I can't say I'm surprised to see South LA zip codes coming to the forefront of the largest amount of debt, as these communities are facing multiple crises right now. And I would encourage that future debt management programs considered by the board look at ability to pay, as these communities are facing, as I said, multiple financial burdens due to the pandemic. That being said, this problem obviously includes all of our immediate attention. And we will not be able to achieve our equitable COVID-19 pandemic recovery and this much needed economic recovery if we allow these mass shutoffs to occur in these vulnerable communities. So I just really want to thank you for your time and allowing me to speak today and all the work you've put into collecting this data and sharing it with us.
Thank you, Ms. Heil. Really appreciate your advocacy and work, and hope that this data is useful and continuing to inform all of our collective responses here. Particularly the household arrearages and debt. To my mind, accompanies, and I think you've made the point, and others as well, accompanies rental debt, accompanies energy utility debt, and other economic stressors that have been a consequence. And here we are. This data really does show in the thick of an economic downturn we haven't seen since the Great Depression, and a very much more complex economic downturn at that. So these data, getting a better granular hold on it, I can only hope will inform what is a better and more effective policy response ultimately for our households and for our communities. Understanding again this cumulative debt that's really accruing at the household level and having these community-wide impacts to services and other dollars that these rate dollars and would otherwise flow to. So. Thankful for the space and your leadership and others here, and look forward to further discussion for sure. So thank you. Next, we have Crystal Gonzalez from Clean Water Action. Good morning, Ms. Gonzalez.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair Escobar and board members and staff. Thank you for collecting, this really important data and really bringing awareness of this water debt crisis. Well, I would like to echo a lot of what's already been mentioned, and also say that we look forward to, the next steps and developing these short-term and long-term solutions. So the survey results really confirmed a lot of the concerns that many of us, water and community advocates have had in regards to the shutoffs and water debt, particularly when the moratorium is lifted, and of course the urgent need for action to protect our households and small water systems. I would also like to recognize that, many of the, as we know, many of the livelihoods of, millions of Californians have been, severely impacted by the pandemic on many levels, as we've all mentioned. And I really want to emphasize that interconnectedness that I've been hearing in terms of, it's a water affordability issue, but it's also, in regards to housing and healthcare. So, anyways, as I was saying, so many have been struggling to pay for basic needs, including water. And yeah, I would like to echo that this is an issue of racial and economic justice. And I think it's imperative that, our communities, low-income communities and communities of color, have access to drinking water and are able to practice, these precautions to, stay safe and weather this pandemic in terms of, sheltering in place and washing their hands. To name a few. Anyways, and to ensure an equitable COVID recovery, as a lot of folks have mentioned already, we need to, we can't allow this wave of shutoffs to occur. And I would also like to state that Clean Water Action is also in support of Senator Dodd's new legislation for SB 222, and SB 223, sorry, to establish the, further protections against water shutoffs for low-income households, and to authorize that creation of a statewide water low-income rate assistance program. In the summer, I'd just like to mention, referencing back to SB 998 in terms of furthering these protections, we did a PRA, Public Records Act request project, and that we reached out to a number of water systems, and we found the need for, for furthering these protections, and to make sure that this is information that's readily available for customers and residents. And so, and also that a lot of the information that we were asking seemed to be, it was stated that it was, difficult to, or not information that was recorded or kept track of. And so this is something that we've also wanted to know. Anyways, I look forward to working with the board to continue addressing this issue of water debt and small water systems at risk for long-term recovery. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you so much, Ms. Gonzalez, for your time and your continued leadership and advocacy as well in this space. And just thank you. And thank you for as well highlighting, again, I think for us here on the human right to water, drinking water is certainly always what is most front of mind, but it's that nexus between sanitation as well that is incredibly critical. And the pandemic has really unearthed. It was the root of the moratorium and acknowledging the nexus between access to water just for basic daily hygiene and sanitation purposes, the very foundation of preventative medicine here, particularly in the middle of the pandemic. So glad to do our part in what is and continues to be a comprehensive approach from this administration as to the evolving needs, both economic and policy-wise here in the water space. So thank you for your leadership and comments there as well. So thank you. And last we have up Mr. Michael Claiborne from Leadership Council.
Yeah, good morning to the chair and to the board. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning. And I'd start by, I think, echoing everyone who's spoken today and thanking the board and staff for completing this survey. It's really critical information, and it's important as we develop policy solutions to this crisis. So thank you. These are stunning numbers. They reflect an urgent need to provide relief to households that are struggling with water and utility debt, and to ensure that small water systems in the state can continue to operate. We've been concerned for some time that absent urgent action, we will see a wave of water shutoffs when the moratorium is ultimately lifted. And this data confirms and really exacerbates that fear. At least $1 billion in water and utility debt, a conservative estimate of 155,000 households with over $1,000 in debt, 1.6 million households, and nearly 5 million people with an average of $500 in debt. These are really sobering estimates and point to the urgent need for action. Consistent with our experience in advocating for access to safe and affordable drinking water and environmental and social justice, the survey data confirms both that the impacts of this crisis are widespread and that this debt crisis disproportionately impacts people and communities of color. These are the same households and communities that are most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic itself. We look forward to working with the board to do everything it can to address household debt and ensure that small water systems can continue to operate throughout this crisis and in the long term. We also recognize that the board is not going to be able to respond to a crisis of this magnitude on its own, particularly with respect to household level water and utility debt. The board and stakeholders must be prepared and ready to dig in and work with the Biden administration, the governor, the state legislature, and stakeholders to secure policy change and funding to provide water debt relief and water shutoff protections to struggling families and households. I'd first note that Senator Dodd introduced SB 222 and 223 on Friday to establish a water affordability and crisis assistance program and to extend and strengthen the water shutoff protections established in SB 998. These bills are urgently needed to ensure that people can afford to pay for their water bills, catch back up when they fall behind, and avoid water shutoffs. We look forward to working with the author and stakeholders to ensure their passage. Additionally, the funding for emergency water affordability programs provided by Congress in the December COVID relief package need to be used quickly and equitably. We're also heartened to see the Biden administration is proposing to allocate significantly more funding for water and utility debt and affordability in the next relief package. Access to safe and affordable drinking water is a human right, and these survey results demand urgent action to secure and realize that right during and after the pandemic. We echo others that have spoken today in stating that we're ready and willing to work collaboratively with stakeholders and this board to address this crisis, and appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the good early thought on how we can start to tee up what is going to be a significant policy discussion, I think, here a bit. But thankful that there is a continuum of effort here. Again, as I think we've noted, between the needs analysis and the Safe and Affordable Fund and the SAFER program at large, and the work that we were doing in that space. But this just adds a layer of magnitude, as I think Darren indicated. You know, this wasn't something that we were really we could have planned for or did in some of our discussions. So just thank you. Well, with that wraps up who we have for our
Chair Esquivel.
Oh, yes.
We did have one additional speaker come in, Ms. Capitola with California Water Association.
Oh, great.
And she is in the Zoom platform and ready to speak, I believe.
Fantastic. Ms. Capitola. Capitola.
You got it. Good morning, board members and Chair Esquivel. I'm Jennifer Capitola with the California Water Association. Just want to echo everyone's comments today and thank you for all your hard work on this. Again, thanking all the water utilities. I know our members, I've heard from some of the other members, just like the state water board members had to shift what they were doing on a day-to-day basis, so did the water utilities have to shift to be able to accomplish this data request. And I think, you know, the results do really speak for themselves that there's a need here. What I just wanted to chime in at the end here is just, you know, thank you so much for coordinating your work with the California Public Utilities Commission. I think the worst thing we can see right now is a fragmented approach to this really important issue. We did see that in the drought. We saw instances where PUC regulated utilities approached something in one way and public agencies in a different way based on the advice that they were getting from regulators. And I think this is so important that we need to make sure that approach is coordinated. We need to make sure that we are looking at all these different elements of how these state agencies are approaching this issue. We've met with many of the PUC commissioners to talk about what the legislature has
Sorry, Ms. Capitola, I think your internet connection is unstable on us.
That is
come back
not
here.
available. But I think this data now allows us to take that relationship to the next step of, you know, we have this data.
I apologize, Ms. Capitola.
Now, what do we do with it? How do we coordinate this public policy to secure funding? Oh,
it's okay. I think you were kind of cutting out. I think at this point your video is
Can you hear
stopped
me?
on us. Yes, we can here and there. You were definitely cutting out.
Yeah, and what I've done, Chair Esquivel, is we've gone ahead and stopped Ms. Capitola's video so that she can just come through via audio, which should help a little bit with the connection.
I'm back.
So Ms.
Can you all
Capitola,
hear
if you want to
me
try
now?
again, I'm going to go ahead and turn off your video because that should help with the connection a little bit, and we'll leave it off. Thanks.
I did that. Great. Well, I'm not sure where I cut off, but I think my plea is just for coordination on this issue. I think the Public Utilities Commission is doing some really good work around affordability. They have also done some work looking at low-income issues statewide and how we approach that. I know the State Water Board is also doing some important work as well on affordability and addressing issues for low-income individuals. So again, just a plea for a coordinated approach as we all move forward with this important data. I think working together, we can come up with some results that really will provide that positive, not just short-term COVID-related impacts for low-income families, but really looking at that long-term affordability that we need.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your good comment. And yeah, it was just about there that there was some cutting off, but we were getting good bits on it, and that was a good summary there. The coordination is going to be key here. I often reflect on the fact that whether it's a private water system that services your home, whether it's a municipal system, whether it's a special district or perhaps it's actually an irrigation district that has an arm of service. We have a very many different flavors of water service that we've provided for ourselves here within the state, and make it complicated a little, definitely sometimes. But what I think is important there is that always at the community and household level is the assumption of a continuity of service, and that we at these levels of government are discussing and communicating so that we aren't having disparate responses, whether in the context of drought or here, to your good point, on affordability, and having that needing to, for ourselves, make sure we have those understandings so that we can make sure that we're actually on the ground in our households having the results and impacts. I think that we're all committing ourselves and discussing here, particularly when we talk about equity. So thank you for those very good comments. Okay, well, I think that now we are done with our public comment cards, and thank you for everybody who, again, has contributed prior to this moment and here even in the discussion today. It's been an exemplary effort, and just really appreciate and hope to carry that goodwill into what are difficult now policy discussions as to how do we respond. And I think to Ms. Tuck's point and others, certainly it's that continuum from the federal, state, and local level of response here. And again, the sort of the continuity of that response is something that I think we all assume we need to make sure that but takes the work of discussion to figure out and ensure we're all on the same page around. That being said, fellow board members, please, thoughts and further discussion as well, even for some further direction perhaps. But I know for myself, this is a lot of information, taking it in, and currently looking forward to definitely the policy discussions that will be had after. But again, please, I open the floor to my fellow board colleagues.
I'll add, this is something that's extremely important to me personally. I've had most of my career around working with communities and with leaders in their communities that have been directly impacted by affordability and just, I think, or lack of affordability and inability to pay water bills. And this is something that I really, echo the thanks to staff that had to, set aside other really essential work to make this possible, and stakeholders. I think we're all showering on that thanks. And I think, as Chair Esquivel said, that we need to, and I look forward to being part of continuing the partnership as we both monitor this crisis and figure out how we continue to monitor that on various levels, and really are part of developing effective responses on all levels and from all partners, including ourselves. I think having this more this California specific characterization better enables us at the State Water Board, the legislature, policymakers, stakeholders, and advocates to understand the level of magnitude and also the characterization of this crisis. And I think that includes how we use our assistance programs that have limited funding and we're already oversubscribed and stretched. and other compliance tools and support, including technical assistance and even administrators if necessary. And certainly to inform and coordinate efforts to ensure that there's state and federal recovery and emergency responses and actions. A couple of things I wanted to highlight are our system, even before this, is not only extremely fragmented and segmented, but there's a lot of segregation of water systems that really undermine our ability to ensure universal access to safe drinking water. And so as we're looking at the potential responses that are happening at, both through the State Water Board, but locally and with partners, looking at how financial and technical assistance and partnerships can support, especially through consolidation and managerial consolidation, support more resilient systems. And I just will note, I think we are all looking at where this is effective in building resilience and improving affordability. It has to be done right to really have those impacts. But I think, there's a recent peer-reviewed study that found that annualized costs could be reduced 44% through consolidated management, where systems needed some treatment of, I think this was around nitrate. So there are ways to work collectively at the local level to reduce costs and enable affordability. There's also just the exceptional leadership by local agencies. And I think, Mr. Chan from East Bay Mud and East Bay Mud's exceptional leadership and innovation is really one that I think enables us as a state and local agencies to really learn and innovate and support what kinds of policies and alternatives to shut off are possible. I really found it interesting and important to look at the analysis that they did around showing the kind of customer assistance programs that they have enable their bottom line to provide water service to all customers. And I think I've seen at least similar analysis from City of San Francisco across different government charges assistance programs. And I just want to note that I think that's an important ground truthing of sort of the misinformed concept that customer assistance programs are inconsistent with Prop 218. I think there's ways where customer assistance programs are often necessary to ensure service for all customers and for the bottom line of system delivery. I wanted to highlight a couple other things, including, some of what I heard is Ms. Tuck, I think helping to highlight the fact that there are combined charges on water bills. And as we think, I think one of the takeaways that we learned from this is making sure that any kind of federal and state assistance to households experiencing financial crisis ensures that assistance can address the total combined debt for utilities and necessary charges on water bills. And, there are programs around, obviously this is in the context of relief for rent and rent debt as well, in the full context of how to ensure access to housing. I also think as we look at responses, I hope we can look at how we reduce barriers to allowing local utilities to expand and successfully implement customer assistance programs, and that support systems around implementing best practices, including those that we provided early in guidance, but also learning from the innovations that local utilities have been doing and are doing well in advance of any guidance that are provided. So I think just pulling back, this really is a shared crisis. We need to be working in partnership to be successful. And we need to be working in a way that reduces racial disparities and builds resilience of water service in the state as we roll up our sleeves and figure out next steps. So thanks again for all of the leadership and partnership and attention, which I think is fundamental to the purview and mission of this board, and appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, board member, for a really good comment, and look forward to the further discussion here. Others?
Thank you. I'll add my thanks to the staff, but also to all the stakeholders who participated and helped generate this information. It is somber. I don't think it was a surprise, but it is one thing to know instinctively that we have a problem, and to actually have the data is something that will be very important in our discussion. And I second and support all the comments about collaborating and coordinating with other agencies, working with our stakeholders, pursuing, at the state as well as federal level assistance in order to rise up and meet these needs. I would just add one more thing from my perspective. I think we've seen, particularly over the past few months, if not years, that words matter. The words we use matter. And when I look at the data that the staff, has presented and will be releasing today, how that data is conveyed will matter. Yes, we have a problem, but as we've heard today, there's a lot of people trying to work together in order to solve this problem. So a water shut off after the moratorium is lifted is one potential worst case scenario, but it is not the only scenario. And there is strong commitment from us, from the water agencies that we've heard from today, from the Newsom administration, and I believe from the incoming Biden administration, to help communities at need, to provide the support necessary to see through this together and rise up and become better for all of this. And so I would encourage all of us, all of our stakeholders, in communicating with our constituents to be careful with the words we use, not to undermine the gravity of the situation, but to assure folks that their water is not going to be shut off, that we know of, immediately, that this is not something that is for sure is going to happen. It is something that we are aware of, we're keeping an eye on, and that we will work collaboratively together to make sure that public health is protected, that water as a human right is available to all of our citizens. So I'll just leave it at that for now, but I think we've all learned over the past few months and years about how important it is that we communicate things in a fair, objective, and collaborative manner.
You're here. Thank you, board member.
I don't want to take up much time, but just want to really thank everyone for the comments and staff. I know that this was a big job, and just really think that the way you handled it turned out well. I'm glad we didn't have to issue an order, and just want to align myself with the comments that board member Dodek just made. So thank you very much.
If I could also echo all the excellent comments provided by other board members and stakeholders throughout this morning. It's really has been an eye-opening and humbling amount of information that we've received, just to even fathom the amount of household debt just associated with water utilities in the state is it's an eye-opening number. And my heart goes out to really the communities, the individuals, all of you that are experiencing these challenging times right now. It really is, something where I wish, we could snap our fingers today and have these programs available and, have the assistance there for you right now to ensure that these problems are addressed. And I know that, in government, that doesn't always work that way, but it's comforting to hear that at all levels of federal, state, local government here with a number of water agencies working on solutions to address and work with you on addressing affordability challenges that, there are good efforts underway. So I look forward to hearing back more from this. Just a couple of things, just with regard to the ongoing monitoring piece that Board Member Firestone flagged, and a number of instances today where there's been discussion about how this data really already dates back to October 2020, and now we're nearing the tail end of January 2021, and it takes a big lift, as we've learned, to get through the survey, to collect the information, to analyze the data, and to report back. So I want to be careful about saying this, but I also think we should be considering when that next snapshot, when that next assessment might be warranted. I'm not saying it's immediately, but probably in the fairly near future, we should be discussing how best to refresh this information to know whether this problem is accelerating or decelerating as the economic challenges clearly continue here in California. We just don't know right now really what the future has in store. So it's important to keep our eyes on the prize and really being able to report back to the policymakers about what's changing and as close to real time as we can. And I just want to offer that when we do that, whenever that appropriate time is, just I think we learned a bit here today about the water bills that have multiple utilities on them, whether it's for electricity or wastewater or stormwater or other services. And I just think that we should, earlier in 2020, we had 2 surveys that went out. One was on water, one was on wastewater, to evaluate the status of wastewater systems. And I've shared this before at prior updates on COVID impacts, but I just want to flag again that it might be worth considering evaluating, what is that household debt for wastewater and other, water-related functions that link to the board and to the authorities that we have. It'll help provide a bigger picture of that total utility-based household debt in the state. It'll help us better understand, are there small publicly operated treatment works that are experiencing challenges right now that aren't even on our radar? I just don't know the answer to that today, and whether that's been changing since our last survey last summer. So, obviously the challenges with drinking water are first and foremost. I mean, human right to water comes first, but nonetheless, these are significant debt burdens that folks are experiencing. I just want to make sure that we're doing our best to really understand where those lie. And then my last comment is about the results of the survey on the small and medium systems, and just flagging that our needs assessment is really focused on the smaller group of those systems. I think it's less than 3,000 connections or thereabouts. And so I am curious, maybe for a follow-up later, as to, were some of those systems that are triggering, the 2 or 3 risk factors, were those actually some of the larger, the medium-sized systems that we're seeing face struggles? And just opening the question and dialogue, as we go forward here as to how we can capture that need. If they're deferring capital projects for needed, critical drinking water projects or other infrastructure, if they're experiencing other challenges, that really does signal that, we could have a big, problem on our hands as we go forward. And again, just, wanting to make sure that we're keeping our eye on all these issues. And I appreciate staff's work on this and the follow-up with individual systems. So I'm sure you have some more information on that, and we'll just be interested to hear more as we go forward. So again, thank you so much for everyone's input today.
Thank you, board member, for the good thoughts and comment there. And point well taken that definitely when we look at wastewater rates and investments from communities, part of that whole pie, that one water pie that we know exists and can impact water recycling projects and other innovative things that I think we're all looking as a state at as adaptation strategies for climate change and then other just aging infrastructure challenges, as you said. So critically important we continue to get a better picture and a more comprehensive understanding. So yes, I doubt Executive Director Sobek has a date for us yet, but good flag that I think amongst us all will be interested in figuring out when that appropriate touch point is again, so that we're understanding as this crisis and evolves ultimately, and this economic downturn evolves, how we best respond. So yeah, still to additional discussion and looking forward to that. I have no further question or comment here. I think I did say quite a bit and enough at this point. Just reiterate the great thanks to everyone on the good work for this item. And looking at the fact we're going to be hitting 11:15, let's go ahead and take maybe a 15-minute break until we get, so that we can then hit our next item fresh. I do believe that at first there weren't actually any speakers for item number 3, but that is not the case now. I think we have someone. So we'll go ahead and have staff presentation and go through the item, but maybe first take a break. Mr. Loffer, anything I'm forgetting?
All I was going to observe is that the individual who was going to speak on item 3 indicated she likely will not be able to join. And she was to speak if necessary only, but there may be an opportunity for her to join in the next 15 minutes or so.
Okay, well then we'll provide that, at least that space, and let's go ahead and say just come back together here at 11:30 if that works. Great. Okay, thank you everyone. Take a quick mid-morning break and see you back. Thank you. Okay, I think we can start to gather back here. I think we're a couple minutes late here. Mr. Lawford, was Ms. Dietz able to join us on the Zoom platform here?
Is that she will not be joining us.
Okay. How do we feel then on this item? Should we go ahead and have a staff presentation? Board members, how do you feel? Since we don't have a public commenter, we could simply go to vote, or we can have I know this was a relatively uncontested item, but up to how folks feel. I'm glad to also have a quick discussion and presentation on it as well.
I would offer that it, as in my review, as a fairly non-controversial transition from the old recycled water landscape irrigation permit to the new one, and there's actually no permittees left in that older permit, so I would be prepared to move to adopt unless another board member wants a presentation.
And I would be prepared to second that motion.
Well, then let's take advantage of that preparedness, and I'll entertain a motion.
All right, I'll move to adopt the order under item 3.
I will second.
Great, thank you, Ms. Townsend. Can you please call the roll call vote?
Certainly. Board Member McGuire,
Aye.
Board Member Dodek,
Aye.
Board Member Firestone,
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo,
Aye.
Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. It carries, and item number 3 is adopted. And just appreciate everyone's good work. It was sunsetting of a previous permit and order. So just thank you, everyone. That takes us then to our informational items here, the last couple items, beginning with board member reports, item number 4. Any board members would like to offer up a report? I need to pull up remind myself what I did these last 2 weeks. Any volunteers first? In my slow race to open my calendar.
I can go. I don't have much to report. I am just haven't wanted to mention that I'm going to be doing a keynote for the Water Law Symposium at the end of this month on the 30th. And the focus for the symposium overall is around climate change. And it's a great annual conference around water law that California water law that I know has been a great opportunity in the past to bring folks together.
Great.
I'll provide my report, and that is last Thursday I attended the Los Angeles Regional Board meeting in my duties as liaison, and they took a little bit of a different approach to that meeting. Usually this year around this time they have what they'll call a retreat, but really what they use is their planning time to look at the calendar year and getting ready for the next fiscal year, and the types of goals and initiatives that are critical priorities for the Los Angeles board. This year, they continued a conversation that was started last year with regard to racial equity, and they actually had a full day racial equity symposium last week, which was just really fantastic to see how committed and all in that regional board is in addressing these issues that have really come to the forefront. Yeah, we've heard quite a bit about this even this morning on the COVID financial impacts issue, but just last year with all of the unrest that we experienced. So I'm really encouraged by what the LA Regional Board is doing. It was recorded, so you're all, feel free to watch it at your leisure. They had a number of speakers in the morning, and they got into a more substantive discussion on the racial equity initiative and some of the regional board's initiatives later in the afternoon. And so I just, I bring this up because I often find that the Los Angeles board is spearheading efforts, along so many critical lines, and this is no exception. And so I do look forward to hearing more from our staff on the racial equity initiative and the progress that we've been making over the last few months. It's been a little bit quiet, and so I'm curious to hear how that's been going. I'm looking forward to continuing to engage. I know the LA board has been going through multiple hour training sessions with their staff on, whether it's implicit bias or, other issues to really make sure that they're trained up and, thinking about racial inequities in their day-to-day activities. And I know we're doing much of the same. And so, for me, it's just a matter of getting that report out and, thinking about, as a board member, how are we doing? So just wanted to mention that today. So thanks. That's all.
Yeah, thank you for that, board member. And we just note, actually, our racial equity initiative is water boards wide. So it's less that it's sort of a state board discussion and then the regional boards are having them. And that regional board event was actually informed by and part of the continuum of discussion on the effort writ large. But to your point, hearing where we are on that larger effort, I think would be good to have an update on soon. So thank you for highlighting that. I'll just add that, last Friday, actually, I participated in what is the Environmental Policy Innovation Center, a nonprofit group, EPIC, pulled together a water data prize around consumer confidence reports. These reports are required by the Clean Drinking Water Act of community water systems to inform households of the constituents within their drinking water. What is the quality of the water being served to them? Are there challenges? Are there issues? Certainly, if to be highlighted, but more importantly, a moment to communicate about the value of water and the critical need to understand its quality and to be part of this informed and empowering report that can sometimes seem a little too technical and doesn't really communicate to individuals. So the Water Prize was trying to innovate and spur some innovation and had an overwhelming response from a number of groups. I was fortunate to be a judge on the effort, and the culmination was this last Friday, the 15th, when the Water Prize winners were announced. And so just really appreciate the really great initiative there, and ultimately the importance that the CCRs are to better communicating to communities the quality of their water, and that there are opportunities there with minimal, what we saw, minimal investment, really changing the way that we indicate risk and better being able to make use of what I know is limited time for us all to understand critical things like the quality of water being served to our households. So just want to thank the EPIC team and folks there for the invitation to be on the panel and judge and be part of the event. And no other real things to mention other than that from last Friday.
I don't have anything to report. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Vice Chair. And thank you, board member, then as well. And that'll wrap up board member reports and leaves us with our executive director report. Ms. Sobek, good to see you.
Good morning, board members. I don't have anything other than what was submitted in my report, unless you all have any questions for me.
I don't know if board members did or have anything further, but just thank you as always for what is a comprehensive view of the many things going on at the board. And so thank you for the good work on it. That's all I have.
Yeah, I'll just thanks for it. I mean, it's reflective of a huge amount of progress on so many things across the water boards. But things that stood out to me in particular were around division of water rights, accelerating through a lot of processes that I know we're putting a lot of effort into accelerating and addressing some of the backlog there. And certainly within the SAFER program, and just appreciate all of the breakdowns. There's, it's always good to celebrate the 3 systems that came off the human right to water list, hoping to see a lot more of that over time, sooner rather than later. And also just seeing that there's unfortunately, additional ones going on already. And I think we'll expect to see some of that, as we look at the needs assessment, have a sense of the expanded need, just like we saw in our information item today. But really appreciate the report. I find it super informative and just a good reflection of the huge workload and things that we're doing across the water board. So thanks.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Really awesome report. And in fact, I learned some new things today when I was reviewing the report that I wasn't aware of. And the one that I wanted to mention is on the first page, which is with regard to the COVID-19 wastewater surveillance program that we've entered into partnership with CDPH, California Department of Public Health, on to sample some of the larger wastewater discharges over the next 6 months to evaluate the potential for using that data to identify potential new COVID outbreaks. And so I know this was a hope over the past year as the science has emerged and we've continued to better understand that there is a correlation between wastewater effluent quality and presence of COVID in that effluent versus outbreaks and how those have been occurring. So I was really happy to see this report and really glad that staff's been able to work with collaboratively with CDPH to move the ball forward there and really just using all the tools that we have available to help better understand what we're dealing with in our communities, I think just is really commendable. So just wanted to highlight that piece.
Thank you for that, board member. Really good highlight there. And again, I think the nexus between sanitation is such a strong one for us here, and sometimes doesn't get as much attention as the drinking water side, but just as critical. So thank you for that. Well, thank you, Ms. Sobek. I guess we'll let you off the hook for now, and appreciate your good work. And with that, it brings us to the end of our agenda. And so just again, want to thank everyone for the great morning here. Tomorrow, again, we will be starting at 11 a.m., not at 9 a.m. So please, everyone, do enjoy the peaceful transfer of power and the inauguration tomorrow morning. Anything else, Mr. Lawfer, I'm missing before I go ahead and adjourn us all?
Oh, everything's good to go. Our recess can commence, and then we will begin at 11 a.m. tomorrow.
All right. Yes, non-adjournment, recess, and we'll see everyone tomorrow at 11 a.m. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day. See you tomorrow.